Welcome back to the show. Here's a quick question. Would you like to boost your clinic's revenue by $280 per patient per quarter? Of course you would, because you're doing the math in your head right now. Remote therapeutic monitoring can do that, and Physiotech can help you do that easier. Enhance patient outcomes, ease provider workload, and just turbocharge your earnings. Kickstart RTM at your clinic at physiotech.ca. That's physiotech.ca. And where's your PT license taking you? Embark on extraordinary patient care adventures with Jackson Therapy Partners online at jacksontherapy.com and discover where your skills can take you in your career. Revolutionize your practice with that thing that you interact with hundreds of times a day. That's your EMR. MW Therapy's all-in-one outpatient PT EMR. Experience seamless integration of patient portals, marketing automations, and your billing at an unbelievable value. So unbelievable that I just mumbled my way through that. Switching is a breeze. Check them out online at mwtherapy.com. Our guest today is a man who's journeyed from the lowest GPA in his physio class to becoming a master of orthophysio and a mentor to many. With 14 years under his belt and just a knack for building a successful clinic, this guy's just got fun insights into this thing that we get to do in our profession. So buckle up. Matty's on the show. This one. There we go. Welcome to PT Pintcast. We've got full glasses, heavy hearts, can't lose. There's something about that. Today, a man who's journeyed from the lowest GPA in his PT class, his physio class, becoming a master of orthophysio and a mentor to many. 14 years under his belt and a knack for building successful clinics. He's left an indelible mark on the Toronto physio scene. He's the man who went from zero to hero on Canadian TV. We'll get into that with his show, Matt Does Video. Matty Liang, welcome to the program, my man. Yeah, well, thanks for coming on the show. And we break down borders here. We don't need to show a passport when we do the show across the borders.
So the rainbow or the Peace Bridge, but yeah, it was coming up.
I know. Well, there was that thing that just happened. Was that the Niagara?
It ended up being nothing. I mean, and it caused some trouble.
It's crazy.
Luckily, the border's still open.
It was like an EV battery, right?
Get it out first, right? Yeah.
The border is open, secure and open. All right. First question we ask, Matty, is the hardest. So we get the hard questions out of the way first.
Just down the street here in Toronto,
what do we drink?
Great Lakes Brewery. Where's the camera? There we go. Great Lakes Brewery. It is the beginning of the week, so I did get their light beer, but they make some nice IPAs and some stouts too. If anybody's north of the border and wants to grab something a little different that's not Molson Canadian, not Labatt Blue, and they want to try something a little bit more local. Hey, that's what I built on, right?
Right. Well, let's not knock the staples. Now, right. I don't know if you know this about me. Yeah, I was built on that too. So I didn't go to college in Canada, but I went to school in upstate New York. And a lot of the kids I went to school with were from Buffalo, Rochester, Syracuse. And they would to them, Canadian beer was looked at like the beat. It was like, oh, you got Canadian beer. It was like legit. It was almost like you had a status symbol if you threw a party and you had Molson Canadian or because it was harder to get.
Yes.
You know what I mean? And that's like, but the funny part is for you guys, it was probably just the regular. It was like the Busch Light or the. For us, it was not. For us, it was like, oh, they got Molson. They got Wildcat was or Triple X.
Most
from what I heard.
We were talking a little bit before baseball stuff. It's like if I'm at a Jays game, I'm drinking beer, right? I don't want to have to show a college degree to get beer, or try to decipher the notes of what's in the beer. It's just it's beer, right? So this kind of falls into that as well. So this is a nice local brew there. So Great Lakes, shout out to those guys.
So I didn't get a chance to get out to because we have a really great beer store near my house, which has around the country. And I usually will pick up a nice Labatt Blue or something just to throw me back to college every once in a while. But I'm doing some local too.
Yeah.
This is the Juice Bomb IPA from Sloop Brewing, which is like down the street.
Drink
and I'm okay. I'm secure in my beer hood. It's a fruity beer and I like fruity beers. So this is what I'm drinking. Drink what you love. Don't try to impress anybody. All right, first round brought to you by Owens Recovery Science, a single source for PTs looking for certification in personalized blood flow restriction rehabilitation training. BFR, as the cool kids are saying. Find them online at owensrecoveryscience.com, or they have their own damn podcast where they go an inch wide but a mile deep into BFR, and it's ironically called the Owens Recovery Science Podcast. Johnny and those guys know everything. So where do we start with you, man? I figure I mentioned it. I heard you giggle in the background, which is lowest GPA to where you are now, which although we've seen research on like is GPA a good predictor of intelligence or like potential in the future? And of course the answer is no. So from a lowest GPA to who you are now, an influential physio educator, business person, like give me that point in your journey. The point when
I
you got
love
to
how you
prove all
phrase
the
that
people like,
question,
yeah, I guess
but
grades
I
weren't the
think that's
thing, man. It was something else that I had or I worked at.
for better or worse, kind of, carry around. I've heard other people say
Yeah.
this as well. It's like you never feel like you've hit that point. You've sometimes, that thing that ticks in my head and ticks in a lot of people's head is that you feel like there's this constant conflict. There's a constant battle that you're doing, right? I always say I love, especially through the internet and everything, and we've seen people and they're like, this is my nighttime routine and my morning routine, and I journal and I meditate and I stretch and drink a liter of water in the morning, and I wake up angry, right?
Right.
That's what gets me out of bed. I'm like, oh man, I hate this. Like, let me get on with this. But that's just kind of what kind of makes me tick. So I don't know if I've ever or if I ever will. As I've gotten older, I've tried to maybe appreciate, show a little bit more gratitude for where I've been, where I've come from. Um, but yeah, it's just it's constant, right? Because I told you, I know I shouldn't have known. I mistakenly found out that I was the lowest GPA to get in at U of T, and you know you get through it. I always tell people I got called into the dean's office twice for low marks. Not failing marks, but like they're like, hey, buddy, you're on the line here. And I was like, okay. You pull your socks up a little bit. Then you get to the
Right.
licensing exams,
Right.
and
Cusp.
here in Canada, you got a written exam, and then you have a practical component afterwards once you've passed that. And I had pretty decent marks on the practical, but I just managed to pass. I think it was like 13 out of 17 stations or something like that. And yeah, kind of just got by again. And I was like, wow, this is just me, right? So, I probably keep that a little bit, like I said, a chip on my shoulder. I do find it hilarious a bit when I get up in front of a class more than anything and talk. And when I got my first badge as a part-time instructor at one of the colleges up here, I
Yeah.
did
Yeah. Yeah.
reach
Yeah.
out
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
my old prof at U of T, my old ortho prof, and I said, "Would you have put money on this?" And he just laughed. He laughed. He said my picture was better now than it was before. So because when I came into physio school, I had your classic hockey hair, right? So it was big. It was down to here. It was
There you go.
curly. I had the flow, the lettuce up top. It looked like I was going fast because the curls under the hat made me look like
Yeah.
I was
Get
always
a
important. I
flow.
was going somewhere, but never really going anywhere, to be honest.
Right. Right. Well, that's got to be good, right? It's Groucho Marx famously said, like, I would never want to belong to any club that would actually have me as a member, right? So, and that's got to kind of drive you, right? Like, you don't belong here. It's almost like that Fight Club mentality. It's like, no, I'm gonna prove that not only do I belong here, but I'm gonna accelerate here. So, like, that's
Yeah.
motivation. But let's go deeper. Like, why? Because my undergraduate
Yes.
GPA was a 2.4. But here's why. Because I slept at the college radio station. Because I was like, I am eating and sleeping and breathing this thing that I came here for. I'll go to class and I understand the importance, but I'm like, I was there and I understood, like, when you're done with this, it's going to be chops and it's going to be, do you speak the language? And I realized, like, really quickly, and it's a weird thing, like radio, but physio too, which is like, there's a lot of it that, I mean, I don't know the percentage, but like a lot of it that you want to jump in and just do. So where was that for you? Were you bored? Because research has shown, like, the kid with the bad grades and he's
Wow.
not living up to his
Well, it
potential.
wasn't quite to
Sometimes he's
that
just
point,
bored with what
but
you're putting in front of him and is doing other
I
things. So
definitely,
he looks not
snooze
engaged, but like,
off
what was it for
sometimes in
you?
class, so you
What
get
was it?
distracted. Luckily, when we were in school, not everybody
Yeah.
had a laptop with them,
Yeah.
or an iPhone, because I don't know if I probably would have got through if I had those things to take my mind off things.
Right.
But
Right.
I was always definitely more of a hands-on learner, so I
Right.
don't think that didactic, scholastic way of teaching really ever stuck with me as well as it could have otherwise. And I was always just waiting to get into the lab, right? And into the practical labs and being at internships or day trips and actually being able to, oh, hey, we learned about a condition.
Yeah.
Now here's how we actually apply it. that tactile stimulation definitely was better for me. And maybe I didn't realize it until later on, or else I could
Right.
have maybe leaned into it a little bit better. So I think the way of like discussing conditions
Right.
or
Right.
education on any way. So I know that's something I tried to bring into my teaching, is more of a discussion based, as opposed to just like, hey, here's your PowerPoints, let's talk through. I always think like, why do you want to listen to me at 8 o'clock in the morning on a
Right.
Monday? Like, I
Sage on
don't
the
want to be here
stage.
on a Monday teaching. So let's make this a little bit more engaging. Let's try to get a little bit more of those neurons
Right.
connecting, and in being involved with that learning, I guess. Yeah.
So there it is. You sort of became the instructor you wish there was. And not
Exactly.
saying that there was anything wrong with that instructor or those instructors you had, but you're like,
Mm,
not everybody learns a certain way, right? This whole podcast is sort of like set around conversation, not necessarily presentation, right? There's a time and place for presentations. But in my mind, if they're done in a conversational manner, we call those TED Talks. And those things
mm.
resonate because they sort of take
Yes.
the audience, but also the delivery of that in mind. Physio is, by definition or by practice, like very movement and very,
Yeah.
has an opportunity to be engaging. And if
That's
it's not,
part of
I
it
mean,
too,
believe me, I
right?
zoned out a couple
And then you
times
add
on
in the
lectures.
fact
I'm
that
like, I'm never
you're
going to need
sitting
no
through
notes,
a
and I'm out.
pediatric lecture, and you're like, I'm not going in that world. The last thing you're doing is
Yeah.
you're like, okay, what do I need to memorize here, and like get it over with. But I do love what you just were, because I
Right.
see a lot
Right.
of
Right.
like
Right.
similarities between what your background in
Right.
radio and into physio. And when I met you, at first I was like, wow, that's kind of an interesting kind of jump. But then, over time, I've come to appreciate that a lot more, because, what we do as physios is, even in a clinical setting, it's a story, right? And we forget, and I see this a lot with younger physios. It's, they want to come out and they want to show,
It is.
whether it's imposter syndrome or they feel insecure, they want to show that client how much they know, and it becomes about the therapist themselves and their story, as opposed to it is telling stories and
Yes.
educating and making about the
Yes.
patient, right, or the client, however you want to discuss it. It's a little bit of that. It's the Disney storybook kind of metaphor,
Yes.
right? And we're just a small little sliver, chapter, maybe a poem in that person's day or that journey. But they've got an expectation of what physio is and an injury
Right.
and where it gets to and how it closes, and we've got to be able to fill those pages a little bit with their expectation and our expertise, and helping them through that journey. And I think a lot of radio, now maybe more podcasting, is very much that as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah.
Yes.
You mentioned like storybook journey, like there's the hero's journey is like essentially a story framework. And once you see it, go Google it or look at an image on Google of the framework, and then you'll see most of your favorite movies, right? There's a character who's given a quest.
Yeah.
He's reluctant, he doesn't want to do it. And then he meets, and this is Donald Miller's building a story brand, if you've read it. He meets a guide. And that's where, like, take any of those like hero movies, right? Yoda is the famous one. Right? Yoda is the guide for Luke. Yoda doesn't talk about himself. He doesn't brag about himself. And I think that's where a lot
Yes.
of disconnect happens and again, I was doing the
Exactly.
parallels between physio and communications, or physio marketing. It's because it's about people. That's why it's a very similar thing. It starts and ends with people. And when you in
100%.
marketing or you in physio position yourself as the hero of a story, you lose the audience. Because if this is your story, I don't know where I fit. And if this is my story and you fit as the guide that will help me go from this to this thing I want to do, whatever that is, that's the cool part, is it's sort of open-ended, then I understand and I'm at least willing to be like, okay, I'll listen to what you have to say. But I think you're right. And I think most of the time when it's done, wrong, and I'm using air quotes, it's because, and I was guilty of this myself, as a PT student or new grad, I was like, oh, I think I'm just supposed to like now tell this person how much I know so they know that I know. And I actually called bullshit recently on a reel that I did real quick. And the quote is, nobody cares how much you know until they know how much you care. And I was like, I don't think that's true. I actually think people care.
Yeah.
Does this person know and understand what my problem is, and can they help me fix it? Like, I don't really care how much you know. That's a brag. And do I care how much you care? That's nice. But like, do you see me? Do you understand me? Can you help me? Then I'll pay attention to you.
And I was looking in the camera facing me, and I'm like, I'm doing the thing that Jerry Durham does when he it's like the smirk and the yes, I love it, and I just caught myself doing that as I just saw Twitter message from him come in, apropos at that time. Probably nothing important about physio in the world, just something about baseball he's messaging me, but bragging about that, I'm sure, right? But that's it. And
Probably about
it's
the Niners
100%
game or
understanding.
whatever.
I'm going to just kind of
Yeah.
jump on the side of the story, kind of parallel to this. I was able to learn that from my last ortho internship from a physio who, at the time, we're talking 2000, late 2009, and I don't know how it was, in New York State or how it's been going in the US at that particular time, but that's basically when there was a movement of like boutique clinics just starting up in Toronto, which, hey, that's what we built, right? So no, slag on that, but I was at a kind of a mill physio clinic, so nobody else wanted the internship, and it was a physio who was, he was 64 at the time. I always tell people he looked like Sigmund Freud if he lifted weights. Big bald head, big white beard, glasses up and down, wore a gray sweater and khaki slacks every day. This old Polish man, and he was rough around the edges, but had clients waiting around the block for him. And he just through questions he would ask me. He'd be playing jazz music or something, and he'd be like, "Matt, do you know who that is?" And then you need to make it more about them, and you need to have more of a worldview than just what you spent the last 6 years learning about. You're not going to be successful in a people business by just knowing the articulation and glides of joints and the insertion point of muscles and ligaments and the healing time of an ACL tear. He's like, that's great, but you need to expand your knowledge. You need to find these things like you need to look. I'm forgetting the name of the other book that dives into the storytelling as well. But you need to learn things about this and the human experience, and you need to understand how we exist within this more complex world, right? And what that means. And I think that's, again, it goes back to what you were saying about caring about people and making it a patient first process, and understanding where you fit into that story every time, right? And
Correct.
that's why we spent so much time initially when we were building the clinics, and it was all about, getting it and actually like getting a designer to actually build the space, make it an inviting space, getting rid of those old school curtains that get dirty, and making sure we were playing music, on speakers, making
Please.
sure the colors were bright and inviting, and the space was friendly, and having, just little things to try to find your way into that person's story. Because we always want these great client stories where, I see them for 10 years and 15 years on and off, but the majority of people you're ever going to meet as a therapist are going to be 3 weeks, 6 weeks at a time. You're never going to see them again. You just got to find a way to get out of your own way and actually find your way into their story a little bit better, right?
Yep.
Yes.
And that's simple, but not easy. If there's the hero's journey formula, it must be simple. And that might be true, but I bet you that physio with the gray sweater and the khakis, who had been doing it for a long time, understood that it involved a lot of listening and then processing, and then maybe not, thinking about what he was going to say before he said it, because doing that with humans is going to change, and you can't find that stuff in the patient chart before you see them. You have to you try to understand a person as much as you can. It's simple, but
I don't know if you
not
have a
easy.
similar experience with this, because I know you talk and meet a lot of other professionals and patients, and I've noticed even a difference in generational communication style as well, right? And I always think, when we were growing up, and you thought, a generation is like 20 years, right? And there's like kind of a consistency amongst those generations, but I think as media specifically changes, right, and it's the change in media just keeps shrinking these generational gaps more and more. We have to continue to strive as healthcare in general, right, is to strive to find ways to communicate and connect, whether it's with employees or coworkers or bosses or patients, right? And it's got to be a continuous education on ourselves, right? And we have, like you said, it's easy, but it's complex, and taking the time to work on that as well.
Yeah, 100%. You mentioned the clinics that we built. How do you describe them to people? People are like, paint me a picture, because all clinics are the same, right? They're just clinics, but I'm using air quotes on a podcast. They're not the same. So talk about what you built.
And in the simplest sense of terms, like that, not ever been good with let's say, an elevator pitch, but we went out and we built a boutique, patient forward clinic that we felt we wanted good clinicians to find to be able to build and stay, and watch their career grow as well, because that's something that me and my business partner at the time found that we were getting frustrated with, whether it was the owners of the place, whether it was the managers at the place, the type of clientele, whatever it was. It felt like there was a roadblock to where we wanted to get to. So we wanted to create that place that we felt like, hey, if we can create a place that we want to work at and we stay true to that, one, we'll get better people, and we'll also be able to get the right type of client in for us as well, right? But something that was always meant to be a little bit like, a little bit cool as well, if that sounds old Gen Xy now, but old millennial.
But it sounds like you were trying to do the same thing again, right? When you became an instructor, you were trying to be the instructor that maybe you wished you had, right? And you're going to do it your way. And then you're like, all right, I'm going to build a clinic. What kind of clinic am I going to have? Well, it sounded as if you saw what you didn't like, and you're like, okay, well, if I don't like, I'm ruling these things out. Rule out. What do I want? Where's the place I would want to go? And I work with a lot of people in content, right? And again, these parallels are crazy. And some people a person just asked me today, they said, hey, they're going to be a guest in the podcast in the future. And I said, what do you want to talk about? And he's like, what would your audience benefit from? And I said, I learned from Rick Rubin, the music producer. And Rick said, he's like, don't make it for the audience. Make it for yourself. Rick's like, I make stuff for myself, the artist and myself. We make stuff for ourselves. And then the audience will find you. If you sit around saying, what are these people going to like? Dude, it's too wide, and you'll be guessing, and then you'll be forcing it. And he goes, it comes out all wrong. So it sounds as if you were like, you didn't say what's this area going to like, or what are these few, you were like, what do I like? And then those people will find me. Yeah. There's some people I bet that came in and they were like, no, I don't like this. Great. That was never going to work. But the people who did that it fit were able to get it real quick.
That is so powerful for anybody going to start a business, physio, healthcare, otherwise, everybody. Anything, and I don't know if this is just the insulatedness of physio sometimes. And I've said this is probably the third time I'm coming around to get outside of physio, right?
Right.
You got to grow your mind outside of physio. You can't just be a physio and be successful at being a physio, but you have to find these things from other places, and you need to, you have to also, physios want to be loved, right?
Please
I always feel like we're a little bit the ugly stepchildren of healthcare sometimes, because, we're a newer healthcare that's really accepted, but we're kind of like, we're part of the medical schools, but we're chip on your shoulder, right? But we're kind of in the rehab building to the side.
We have the chip on our
somebody
shoulder.
else's building now, and now it's been retrofitted for you, and you always get the worst lab times for anatomy and stuff like that. And so we have this problem where we want to be loved sometimes so much.
Correct.
And I think when people open their clinics, or they start their Instagram business page, or their online business, how do I get people? Stop worrying about this, because there's so much noise and there's so many people. Be this, be Rick Rubin,
it's vanilla.
Be Jay-Z, be Linkin Park, be that.
Yes. Look at the accounts that blow up, and like use and here's the best part is because on this thing on the internet, people vote with their time and attention, right? And then they vote with their money, right? So it's time and attention, then money. So do you want everybody to like you? Then no one's really going to like you, because no offense to anybody who's like, I like vanilla. Good, right? I like when someone describes a person as vanilla, you're like, well, that's not good, right? Like, oh, vanilla, that sounds horrible. It's the edges. Well, how do I get everybody to like me? If you figure that out, please tell me.
Really
I would love to figure that out.
And this is gonna sound like slander to somebody, but that's like Maroon 5. I want everybody to like me, and everybody's like, yeah, you're okay. But Maroon 5.
Hold on a second. Wait a minute. I don't want to start a war, but for a while there, back in the 90s and early 2000s, it was Nickelback. But I actually defend Nickelback from north of the border, and here's why. Everybody, and I'm using air quotes, everybody hates Nickelback. Yeah. Chad Kroger has a hockey rink at his house and 50 million downloads. And whenever and every once in every other year, where I was a radio broadcaster, we have a Live Nation show with Nickelback, and everybody hates them, but the damn thing sold out in like every time. So everybody hates Nickelback. So there is this element of familiarity. I get what it is, right? So being a radio program director of a rock station, I would play like a new rock song, and then I'd play like a 90s Pearl Jam. I'd play a new rock song, and then I'd play like a familiar 5-year-old Nickelback song. And that's a way to sort of balance, like, I'll give you a little bit of new, and a little bit of familiar. So I feel like you can model a clinic design after that, which is give me a little bit of new, but if you give me too much, I'm going to reject it because I need to have a foot in what I understand, and then I'll accept a little bit, like the graffiti behind you if you're watching a live stream. Okay, that's not normal, but I'll accept that. But what do I have? Okay, there's the other elements that are here that I understand. This is a healthcare environment. Cool. But there's music playing.
Yeah.
Okay, that's different. So it's like keep one foot in what I understand, and I'll let you have the other foot.
I
But
love how you put
that
that
needs
together
to be a balance.
If we take that back to that storybook, right? We take that back to Jedi's, right? And somebody's coming into a physio clinic. They've been to a dentist clinic. They've been to their family physician. Maybe not a physio clinic yet.
Sure.
Maybe they have. But if you go in and it's something completely different, if it's just so dissimilar, it's like picking up a book. You read the first page and you're like, nah, and you put it right back down. Little bit, right?
I get it. I don't understand context, but if you give me a little that I know, I'm willing to stick around, right? And that's balance. All right, so let's talk about people. You had hinted on my, you wanted to start a place where people, it was focused on clinicians because you said people a couple of times, but you meant clinicians. So in your experience building, you have five clinics that you built.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
That's not a small deal. Anybody out there? What's the most critical factor in recruiting the right talent, not the most talent, right? Because the most is easy. Just buy a bunch of ads on LinkedIn or just recruit everywhere. So how do you look for that right? Because now they have to be sort of an extension of you. You can't scale yourself. So how do you find right people or good fits?
Right? They're extensions of you as the clinic owner, the clinic manager. Because that's how you scale, right? There's only one way to scale in a healthcare business, right? It's we're a people first business. We're brick and mortar still. Like you have to, unless you cloning yourself, like there's no way around it at this point. So finding the right people, and it's a challenge, and I kind of stumbled upon a little bit of it as I got better at it. Maybe a little trial and error. I still think HR, if we want to call it that, from a clinical standpoint. How do we get the best? How do we assume the best residents in surgical departments get there? Right there, you have the head surgeons who are instructors. You have people running rounds who are making hiring decisions. Who you see them in work and in practice. You've been able to talk to them outside of that. You've been able to pick their brains a little bit. And I don't think, finding somebody on Instagram. I don't think finding somebody, in a stack of resumes does that justice. Even having an interview for, let's say it was a 2-part, 3-part interview. I don't know if you're going to get enough. I think if you're, that's where you are right now as a business, as an owner, like that's what you maybe have to work on right now, but continue to build out. A lot of, in the last, and just for sake of the story, I've been out of my business now for 6 months. But I probably 6 months before that is when I made the decision to start my departure. So I stopped doing the hiring for a year now. But a lot of, I'd say clinician wise, specifically for physios, I don't think I ever hired somebody in the last 5 to 6 years that I didn't already know, that I hadn't built as a backbench. I've heard people call it, waiting in the bullpen, something like that. But it's from being at the schools, volunteering time, doing some instructor work as well, taking them on as mentors. We never took clinicians for their 6-week or 8-week practicums. It just wasn't set up that way, but we would take them for one day every week or a couple hours, doing everything from at this, the local school here is University of Toronto. So whether it's going into the lab and being a community clinician, helping in with hands-on work, or doing more kind of clinical reasoning work with some of the students, getting to know them, understanding how they work with you as well. Like how do they take feedback? What type of feedback do they look for? Who's doing this just for a grade? Who's really invested in this? And then after they graduate, continuing to stay in touch with people over time, right? And then if they don't end up working for you or they move somewhere else, but you created a great connection, those are the referrals you're going to get from people. Or, again, because luckily to be in Toronto, but other colleagues of mine who do some mentoring would oftentimes refer somebody directly into me and say, hey, I don't know if you're hiring, but I've got this great person I think kind of matches up really well with you. And that was the last probably 6 years of hiring, 5, 6 years of hiring. Sometimes we would still put, let's say, a call out for some resumes, but we just end up going to the people that anyways.
Well, I mean, outside of, I'm not married, but outside of getting married, like this is kind of one of the largest commitments you're gonna make with a person, right? I mean, I know the purchase is like a house and a car, right? But like, if this is your business, that's outside of picking your partner, your significant other, like this person is going to represent you when you're not in the room, and like how to figure that out. Like, that's why talent acquisition is a, multi-billion dollar industry, which is like finding the wrong person can cost you a lot or everything, right? Depending on what field you're in.
It can be in our industry specific, especially if you're in a pay practice, it can be very debilitating, right? It's not just the money you spent on salary, the time you spend training, onboarding, all that other stuff. It's the damage it does to the clinic brand, the clinic name, and that might, one of those things they say, right? You can have 5 great interactions and maybe nobody posts on Yelp or on Google, but you have one bad one and they're telling, maybe they don't post something, but they're telling their spouse or their partner or their family, people at work, and now you've lost.
Correct. Yep.
Yep.
You can't wash that off, man. I mean, how many times do we see, we're recording on December 4th. By the time this comes out, somebody will have stuck their foot in their mouth, said something they shouldn't have said, and the cat has left the bag. The bell has been rung, and you can't wash that off. Somebody said, a professor asked a great question in communication school, which was, who's responsible for public relations at an organization? And of course, it's a room full of communications journalism kids. And we're like, we are. And they go, everybody. You're either doing public relations well or you're doing it poorly, but you're doing it either way, because everything, and Jarrett, you mentioned Jarrett, your front desk is public relations. How it sounds when someone gets their voicemail greeting, that's public relations. How it feels when someone opens your website or opens a brochure, it's public relations. It's like a muscle. It's getting stronger, getting weaker. It's not staying the same. It's not happening.
Yeah, and
you have to look.
What you just said, right? It's like the website, the phone reception, walking into the reception,
all of it,
coming from the reception to the physio room, going outside to the gym, if that's the type of place it is. If those things don't all line up and continue to build that brand, that continuity of the story, and that if that's all not the extension of that initial goal, like you're either losing people, you're losing staff, you're whatever it might be, right? And there's a lot of, as we see now, and I know you're tuned into this better than I am, but with every clinic that opens now, it's like hard launch on Instagram or TikTok, and there's not necessarily that oh, hey, there's this, because you can make yourself look real big on Instagram or TikTok very easily with some small equipment. But then what happens when you get into the clinic? What happens when you haven't taught your front desk and your admin team, who are quite frankly the most important people in that building, how to interact with people, how to have a good opening communication with somebody? That's where we lose stuff, right?
What's the state? Is there a steak in the States? It's Smith and Wolinski's, I think. That's like a bougie steakhouse. They have like what's like a bougie restaurant that like is top shelf in Canada. Like what's any kind of food,
Toronto,
whatever.
That everybody always talks about still to this day. It's called Harbor 60. It's in the Harbor Commission building, if you ever hear.
So you walk into Harbor 60 and they're selling a steak that had the head chef from the Outback Steakhouse bought. It's the same, but you walk into that place and the waiters are wearing white aprons and they all have a tie. I don't know. Like that's what Smith and Wolinski's is, right? You're not just buying the steak. The advertising professor would say you're buying the sizzle, baby. So it's like, if these don't matter, if the price doesn't feel like the experience, again, we don't sell a product in physio. Sell a service. And I want to know what it smells like, what it sounds like. Walk into an Apple store and walk into a Best Buy. And you're telling me it's the same thing? Absolutely not. You understand and you're okay with that Apple store experience. So it's amazing to me when people get it. Wow, look at that. He must have succeeded by accident, or like that was luck. It's like, I don't know, man. They paid attention to enough of the right levers to pull to get the biggest effect, downstream. So, all right. So I asked you about getting the right people, like finding or trying to hedge your bets to find the right people. What about keeping the right people? What about retention
Yeah.
strategies? Like how do, when someone says like, how do you keep the right people?
Yeah,
you hinted at this before though.
Puzzle. It's something that I think has changed a lot, and I don't know how, the egress of people have changed, especially through the pandemic issues. The hardest time we had was reopening after being shut down by the government we were shut down for 11 weeks, I think. I mean, I found some loopholes to stay open at least one day a week because I was going stir crazy. But as a clinic, we opened 11 weeks later, and that was the biggest issue because now you have people who don't want to take the transit, and you have people who might have taken that opportunity to move out of the city with their partners or whatever it might be. It's also being a metropolitan area, it's highly condo, like we set up near condos because it's high density, easier place to attract people. You're able to have a nice big footprint in a smaller kind of area where there's a lot of competition. But that also means as your therapists get older, they might be looking to, I say, settle down, but maybe some have families. Maybe they want their white picket fence in a big yard for their dog to run around with. And that's maybe been changing for us a little bit. And it's because it's physio, there's a lot of clinics, especially in a city. You don't want to make a 30-minute commute anymore. You can always go work somewhere else, that's now down the road to you as opposed to the way it used to be. So I think it's changed a bit. I also think physios, go back to this, physios are a little bit of a different breed of person sometimes. And I've heard some people say, well, one, I still always think physios are criminally underpaid, just across the board in general. That's one. So, I have, friends and colleagues here who say, oh, in Toronto and Ontario, people talk a lot about what's their percentage of their billing fees as opposed to maybe what their actual end of year take home is, which is a whole different argument with how you talk about this. You're a new grad and people are offering 40%, maybe somebody's offering you 45%. Again, changes with how busy you are, but for the sake of the argument, physios who are now owners sometimes don't want to give up 1% when a therapist is asking them after a good year. And I'm like, let's do the math. A good physio bills $220,000 worth of physio. Like, what does that actually mean to you, right? Over a year. Can you not run your business by giving that person 1% and making them happy to do that?
What will it cost to lose that therapist? Right? What could it cost?
I was getting at the end of my time at my clinic, it was a big argument for me was trying to get the front desk and the support staff paid more money. And I wanted them to get over, we have a minimum wage, 15, 50, moving up to 16, but the living wage in Toronto is $20, $21. So I was trying to get this pushed up. And I understand, like, hey, I'm one of the owners, like it's coming at us somewhere. I know that,
sure.
For whatever reason, we all tend to feel as business owners, or if you're in charge of that pay, it's like, oh, that's a lot of money I'm giving up to somebody for a reason that, for whatever reason that is. And at the end of the day, you got to think to yourself, well, if I have to pay a front desk support staff $1 more an hour, $2 more an hour, it's 40 hours a week, that's $80 a week I'm spending, right? Can I not afford that? That's one physio session. Maybe I got to get my ass and do one more physio session, but it's not.
What does that person say?
I don't know if it's because we, as physios, we all start with a salary. We all think it's too small. We all little cheap as we continue to move up. But so, I mean, it's such a simple answer to give you right off the bat. But the number one is just pay people an appropriate, livable wage for the work that they do to make them feel appreciated.
What a radical idea. All the radical ideas come out of Canada, because that's where. Are you annoyed that whenever something goes batshit crazy in America, we all threaten to come to Canada? Are you like, don't freaking come here, you nuts?
I'll usually send people I know a message and say, like, let me know if we need to get you, like, if we need to dig another underground railroad to get you guys up here. We want the good ones.
But everything you said to answer my question of, well, how do you keep people? You started spouting off, well, distance and what do they want and what are they focused on? I just boil that down to you paid attention to the audience again.
Yeah.
Right. You paid attention to, like, what do you want? What drives you? Right. Like, is the question that you're trying to answer. And then, hey, does that fit? Because you understand, listen, if I'm in downtown Toronto and you want a white picket fence and you want a 30-minute commute, that's not going to work, because you've got to have that. And you're like, hey man, I've done everything I could, but that's not a good fit for you anymore. And that's okay. That's a great reason to not be connected. But until that time, just sounds like you paid attention to the audience.
We keep coming back to that same lesson, right? And I think the only other thing I would add to retention, more towards the younger therapist, and specifically the younger therapist.
Right.
I know there's definitely a movement from clinic owners, because what do you do after you have one clinic, right? You want a second clinic. You want to expand your clinic. You want to scale up. How do you do that? You got to not be there, right? So there's a lot of people talking about business in healthcare in the US and in Canada. I am yet to be shown that it can work, and you can keep the same level of retention, the same level of client and patient success without somebody who's an identifiable owner at the. I'm not talking to say 40
So you need
hours.
you need someone who has or understands the vision on site physically.
I think so, and because the physio, the chiro, the massage, osteo experience is, again, it's a very tactile experience. It's an in-person experience.
Sure.
Getting a weekly email from your owner who lives in the beach isn't doing it.
Right.
And if it doesn't do it for me, I know it's not going to do it for a lot of people.
Too detached.
It's too detached. You're not there on the day-to-day issues. They're not in the trenches with you. They're not there if you need a hand with something. And that's something I've heard people tell me in the past. That's not just me saying, hey, I have it right. That's something I've had multiple therapists at different levels tell me, that they're like, why do I don't care. Sure, or I'll move to your clinic because I don't care, right?
Right. There it is. I don't care how much you know or care how much you care. I care, do you understand what my issue is at this clinic, not just as a patient, as a colleague? And are you here? Do you actually understand? If you live at the beach and I'm here at the clinic and I get an email, great, you can do stuff from wherever. Does that satisfy the thing that person needs? If the answer is no, it's not going to work. I know it does on paper. It does on a whiteboard, but in practice, you're saying it doesn't work.
You're making it sound too easy. We're supposed to.
It's simple. It's not easy though. It's simple. Correct. You gotta make it. $300 for the $299 for the online course. Make it $99 for the online course.
If you sign up now, it's $99. But it's just us both saying, hey, it's easy. Just listen.
All right, you ready to do? We do a thing called 3 questions. I just give you. It's like warming up the goalie. I just give you 3 slap shots in a row. You ready for 3 questions? Let's do it. Right.
On the hot seat with 3 questions on the PT Pintcast.
All right, 3 questions brought to you by our friends at ATI Physical Therapy, leading the charge in PT clinical research, with more than 900 of their clinics receiving top marks in CMS's merit-based incentive program. They're a team to join for career growth. Explore the opportunities now at atipt.com for what's open there. They're all over the place. 3 questions. Number 1. I want to know this. If you could have any superpower, what would it be and why? This is very telling about the person. It's nothing to do with superpowers, but it's all about you. What would you have as a superpower? What would it be?
I would go with the regenerative powers of Wolverine.
Of Wolverine, like Logan. Yeah. I mean, why not?
Yeah. I mean, listen, there's a reason a lot of us got into, physical health studies. And why is that? Because we're hurt a lot, I'm not a big guy.
This begs the question. Yeah. This begs the question, though. If physio was a superhero, who would they be? It gives a really, and hey, maybe some massage with the adamantium claws or something like that could be a good fit. Maybe a little.
What was that trend? They already had those steel things that they were like scraping. That's what it was.
Grasp technique. Yeah, they IASTM, rubbing butter knives on each other. Yeah, that's the thing. Second question: what's the most memorable piece of advice you got from a mentor or colleague? You alluded to the guy in the gray sweater and khakis, but it could be anybody. What's a piece of advice that you're like, I remember that, maybe I live by that on a semi-regular basis?
Oh, that's a hot, spicy question.
Yeah.
That's a hot, spicy question. I would still go back to that one interaction we talked about earlier with, there was, just some jazz music playing, and it was just really telling, because, I'm this hotshot 24-year-old at the time coming out of school, with my collared shirt and too much cologne on probably. And here this guy, he's like, it doesn't matter. He's like, he would always joke, mask master's of physio. Oh, you want to talk to the master of physio, not me.
Oh
And
man.
the lessons we're telling though, right? And it was have a little bit more, have a bigger worldview, and how that connects to the client and the patient. And I think I'll take that as my answer, because I think that changed so much about how I was approaching that day and the
Yeah.
rest of my time there, and the rest of my career as well. That
Well,
maybe
now.
got me some other some other
Yeah.
lessons.
Sounds like it. All right. Third question on 3 questions. If you had to choose a completely different profession, what would it be? If you're like, nope, physio, not allowed. What would what have been and why?
Maybe Bat Boy. Is that
Why not?
a little part-time work? You know what? I would have been a contractor. I come from a family of contractors, but I was recently building a fence with my buddy at his new place, and maybe the most enjoyable day I had, all fall, was just putting your hands to
Digging some
something,
holes, man.
building something, using a power drill.
Yeah.
There's something, I always say we're the carpenters of the healthcare system anyways,
There it is.
right? So we are mechanics, we're carpenters, whatever you want to say, but that's what we do. We just look at the world in a slightly different way. So I think if I wasn't doing this, maybe I'd be putting tile down on the ground and making those cuts and, that grout down instead for a living.
Love it. All right. Last thing we do on the show is the parting shot.
This is the parting shot.
All right, parting shot. Your chance for a mic drop moment,
Oh,
a
God,
soapbox statement, brought to you by our friends from the Academy of Orthopedic Physical Therapy with their 5th edition of Current Concepts of Orthopedic PT, a great resource, constantly updating it. Wherever you are in your PT journey, and if maybe an OCS or being a better clinical orthopedic PT is it, this is from the latest evidence. It's got everything in there. orthopt.org. Parting shot, Matty, what do you got for us?
Okay, this is for but mostly those younger therapists.
Okay.
Stop arguing on Twitter about the best, what's the best evidence to, for one injury or another. Everything comes down to a multimodal approach, and that's been the evidence for 20 years. So stop clogging up my Twitter feed with that shit, and get a mentor, no matter what it is. Somebody who, like we talked about, is looking at you and helping you see manipulation or an acupuncture point. And that goes for when you go into business too. Talk to people, be a human. Talk to people, meet people, and be friendly.
I heard great advice that you should have a mentor that is at least 10 years older than you, and you should have a mentor that's 10 years younger than you. So you don't get too, so it's like, it's two perspectives. You're thinking, how is the generation, below me or younger than me? And also like, what did the generation above me or before me learn that I could take it? And at first I was like, that's ridiculous. Why would I ask someone 10 years younger? And it's like, well, that's taking a little bit of humble pie. Like maybe, you're saying there's nothing I can learn from someone younger than me. Come on, no way.
Hey, your vocabulary will stay young.
Yes, it will. You won't have to go to Urban Dictionary nearly as much. You'll understand what the cool kids are saying these days.
Here's what else I've learned. They'll tell you if your jeans are too skinny.
Yes, they will.
Tell you that.
Yes, they will.
They'll tell you. They'll keep your fits in check. If nothing else.
Yes, they will. All right, Matty, appreciate you stopping by. Let's have you back on. I feel like there's more we can do. And
man. I really appreciate it.
We'll try to figure out the next Canadian Physio conference. That was like 4 or 5 years ago.
I know. That was fun, though. That was fun. Montreal is always a great place.
I know. All right. They said the best conversations happen at happy hour. Well, you know what? Thanks for coming to ours. Appreciate your time, man.
Cheers, man. Thanks so much. Appreciate it.